Bob had some questions, I understand, in the last meeting about the financing plan for PED. I worked through them last week. I think there was a misunderstanding in how whether the funds coming in from hospitality and tourism were going to be or not. These are annual projected surpluses from the CFO for those facilities, for those revenue facilities, as they call them. And we have claimed a portion, not all, but a portion of those surpluses in each year to fund the PET contribution. So there is no trickery or softness to these equations or to this strategy. It is, we will claim. Bob, do you want to mention anything on that?
No, I think your characterization is correct. There was a misunderstanding relative to the matching. When does the surplus get generated, and when would it be available to fund current year PED outlays? So, you know, our discussion clarified that, and I think there is a matching principle in place. And likewise, I think the other concern about whether the approach, the calculus accommodated additional planned projects, you know, the declining percentage of the surplus that's going to be assumed, I think accommodates that. I would, you know, I wouldn't run a commercial though, that I think at this phase, additional pressure testing of those numbers is warranted, so that this committee and what we convey to our constituents is, you know, is their projections got it, but that they're thoughtful, they've been, you know, reviewed, and it's reasonable.
Yeah, these are the same projections that the CFO and the office of the CFO runs to anticipate future expenditures in out years. So these aren't separate numbers. These are the numbers that they use for those projections going forward. And then
Dale,
to note, sorry, yes. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is Doug Warner. Of course, I worked with Export Charleston. I can tell you those numbers are real. Those are validated. We've got a 40-year track record of projecting with the city what those dollars are, and seldom are we off. So just FYI, there's a pretty extensive track record in those dollars specifically.
Right. Thanks, Doug. And that's good to know. I mean, you know, if we know anything about the office of the CFO, they are careful and diligent. So we anticipate, or we, you know, the numbers that the CFO gave me to try to develop this, we have trust them. So they're there. And one thing to keep in mind is we are only using a portion of the projected surpluses per the PED phase mileage of the alignment related to tourism. So we are not claiming all of the surplus. In fact, we're claiming 50% or less of the surplus. And in some areas for white materials, it would be 0. And for the east side, it would be 50% of 50%, which is 25%. A lot of the surplus will remain for the other purposes. So there you go.
Hey, Dale, just a quick final thought as we move from PED funding to sourcing dollars for the construction phase, assuming we get to that point. I think we need a sort of a robust discussion around what contingency dollars should be thought of and factored in. I mean, in developing the proposed language for the staffing aspects, so dollars aren't the only constrained resource. You know, it's expertise in asses and seats, and not sure that that's a provision, not sure that betterments are a provision. Things go bump in the night, that kind of thing. So what we all would be comfortable with in terms of providing a contingency, whether that's 20% or something, you know, reasonable for this kind of scale and complexity of a project. You know, I think we have to consider that. Someone needs to consider that as we move forward.
You're absolutely right. So, once we step into PED, if we step into PED, again, Caitlin and I and other folks are already having discussions with various components of a future construction financing strategy. We laid some of those out. We have some sources available to us that are easy to arrange and manage, and other ones are going to be more difficult. We're starting that discussion, and when we move through PED, we'll get a sense of, okay, is this thing real, or are we going to be able to design and engineer the structure that works for the city or not? And then the more salient the yes becomes to that, then you're dead right, we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it. But there are already discussions underway for those resilience bond components and what would a peninsula-wide mid mean. Those discussions have started. I'm giving you my word, I have started those. So again, we have to have priorities and phase this right, but we are working on it. If that creates any confidence, I hope that creates some confidence that your suggestion is being taken very seriously. Good. Then one other thing I want to work through. This may take a little bit of time, not too much time, but it occurred to me that I assumed that everyone understood the title control benefits of the surge structure, because although this is a surge structure, it will have title control benefits, and it is not an explicit component of a surge structure, but the way a surge structure works, the benefits are there. So I'm going to share my screen and just work through a number of slides. Most of the slides come from the land and water analysis that Wagner Ball, the Water Institute, did before I came here. We did on this. So let me just find my presentation. Hold on a second. It's not popping up.
Hey, Dale, as you do that, the punchline to your comments might be, would the structure, if in place, have precluded the flooding that we had experienced a week ago?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's what I want to talk about. When I saw those king tides, and it's like, okay, what can we do to deal with those things? And, we need a drainage system to deal with those. And that's some version of Calhoun West, because, again, that was tidal, that wasn't stormwater. But let me work through these slides. Can y'all see my screen? My screen that just popped up. Is it there? Good. Okay. So this is just loose, and this is for us. I mean, I will stand by this general analysis here, but this is to help the advisory committee understand these tidal benefits. So the map on the right, these are Wagner Ball Water Institute images, but the map on the right shows the 100-year floodplain. You can see the light blue where it is. So we look, there's tremendous amount of risk on the peninsula, and the white part is the old high ground. So we get that. And then you look at sea level rise impacts. This is assuming 3 foot of sea level rise. I think over the next 70 years was the analysis that that Wagner Ball, or the parameter that Wagner Ball put on this. But you can see those old tidal creeks are reappearing. They're going to get more water and more water. So there's this tremendous tidal risk that we already have. Okay, not stormwater risk, but a tidal risk. And here is just a sort of an image of the wall. And if you can see my cursor here, the wall would be up here at 12 foot NAVDA, but major flood stage occurs right here. So this is off of mean sea level, not NAVD 88, right? So they're just using a different datum here. But the major tide would be here. So the wall will prevent it. So that's great. So we have some ancillary benefit. But here's another map from the Wagner Ball analysis. But here you can see with the wall in place, a lot of places are dry. This is a mimic, in essence, of the Army Corps of Engineers, sort of what benefits the wall would provide. But you get a sense here that Wagner Ball sees the water team saw, and the discovery report team saw the benefits of doing this. But what happens is there are tidal gates. And then there are pedestrian gates and railroad gates and vehicular gates. The tidal surge gates are right here. There's one up here in Wagner Terrace. There's another one here at the outfall. There's one here at the edge of, and this is just preliminary design, but one here at the top of Brittle Bank. one here by the Ashton River Bridge, one here at the Long Lake, and one down here by the Coast Guard Station. Okay, so those are the tidal surge, and there's another one up here on New Market Creek. And then you have the pump stations, the permanent ones, they're related very closely to the location of these surge gates. So this is where the tide pushes in, and it pushes in and comes up over structures and starts to flood. Okay, so, and the pump stations, again, the permanent ones are closely correlated to the location of those tidal surge gates. And this is from the TSP. And I just want to point this out here. It's in the TSP. The gates, these surge gates, storm gates would remain open. And the gate close procedure would be initiated based on storm surge predictions from the Weather Service. When major flooding is expected, so that's the 8-foot mean low water, that's the king tide incidents, and those king tides are going to increase. The storm gates would be closed at low tide. So before the flooding starts to occur, before the water starts to push in and up the creeks and starts to flood folks, those tidal storm gates will close. So none of the water gets in. So now you have a whole bunch of what's called storage capacity to deal with any rainfall that's occurring. Okay, so now you've created a more robust system because the water isn't coming in now. You could close only the west side of the peninsula, those tidal gates, or you could close the New Market Creek gate too. You can operate these gates depending on the particular tide and how it's going to attack the peninsula. So this is in the TSP, and this is something that in PED the city would design. Like, okay, when do we operate these surge gates? What happens is, in the larger scheme of things, as we think about this, so with that first image here, and this image here, we are going to need to do something to prevent tide from taking over the peninsula in the future, right? It's happening, it's going to happen. So no matter what, we're going to have to do something. Some type of wall is going to be needed, and whether that's a knee wall or a surge wall, you're going to have to do something. Because these tides won't stop. King tides are going to come around twice a year. They cause a lot of damage, and you get tropical storms too. So what do you do about that? And one thing to keep in mind is no matter the size of the pumps, you can have the biggest pump system in the world. No matter the size of the pumps, when water from the harbor starts to come in the city at any level, at any sort of substantial volume, that water will overwhelm the drainage system. So the water is going to stack up in the streets and in homes. Right, so that's why you have this wall to protect that water from coming in. So, I mean, Matt Fountain says, you can't pump the harbor. He's absolutely right. That's a sort of shorthand there. So we had Matt run a little analysis for us. So just for a knee wall, could we just do a knee wall? We could, but in the low battery restoration, that's a really nice knee wall. It's a really nice wall. It's a cost about $70 million a mile, present value of 2021. So it's sort of expensive, but if you just did the ugliest, simplest little knee wall, it would be, Matt estimates at current costs and things, it'd be about $10 million a mile. And so I just did a sort of analysis here. Let's split the difference. About half the peninsula would need a really attractive knee wall, and half the peninsula would need an ugly sort of, utilitarian knee wall. So let's assume $35 million to build this knee wall on average, right? 50% simple and 50% really nice. Your costs here to the city are going to be $280 million. In essence, this is a planned capital investment if we're going to stay on this would have to be a planned capital investment if we're going to maintain the peninsula area, just because we have to deal with these tides. So if you think of the structure of the surge structure costing the city a net $250 because of after the easement credits, we're going to get both tidal and surge for perhaps a little bit of a lower cost. This is all conjecture on the cost, but you can see here that this tidal structure, this surge structure has these tidal benefits, and thus we don't have to do both. We can get both benefits, and that in fact may leave more money for Calhoun West or for whatever drainage needs on the peninsula and elsewhere in the city. So there's a financial resilience component to this too, that this surge structure could provide the benefits. And if it was in place last week, that water would not have come up into the South of Broad neighborhoods in Gadsden and Rutledge and all those places. So just wanted to explain that to you, that I assumed everyone, I was wrong. I assumed everyone understood that, but I was wrong, and I hope this helps clarify that. At least sharing my screen.
I had a question, if I could ask, please.
Yep.
I understood, I didn't see it, but I understood that the market flooded last week, as it often does in these tidal situations. Can you explain how, first of all, why? Because we thought that that was taken care of with a big project. And secondly, how this arrangement with the tidal gates would handle that part of the city.
I don't know what kind of flooding occurred over there. This wasn't a rain event. I don't know if there is there's a flap gate or a check valve needed over there or a check valve that's already installed that wasn't in place. You do have this issue. Mike and I have talked about this. Mike Seekins and I have talked about this. So as the water in the harbor and the rivers rises, there's a connection in the shallow surface groundwater, right? And so the pressure on one side of the wall one side of the city gets high, and on land, the groundwater starts transferring the water to the other side. The water level is trying to balance itself, right? So you can get groundwater impacts, groundwater coming up in the city simply because the water in the river is higher. And so with a surge structure, and I checked this with the Army Corps, you recall that first image that I showed you, the surge structure above ground is concrete or something really nice, depending on what we can afford. Below ground, it's on piles. And in between the piles, you can just put sticks, big sticks or concrete columns there, which is what you do on the beach. But you really want to put cutoff walls there, so sheet piling cutoff walls, which then will stop that transfer of water between the open system and the city groundwater. And so that's how you get that protection. So the surge wall may have protected there too. Again, cutoff walls are not 100% watertight. So if the tide, or you get 6 days of high tide, you may start to have some water popping up through the groundwater. Through the groundwater system, but it's going to prevent a lot of that seepage coming through. So it's not a perfect solution, but it would likely have prevented some of that. I saw some of the images on East Bay, some of the new apartments on East Bay and on Washington, and they look like they had 2 feet of water in them. The water that was up by Morrison Yards, that was just an overtopping of the berm. So the city put in a berm up there to protect that area that dips under the bridge, and it's just overtopped it. That's a design exceedance. That's not a design failure. That's a design exceedance. So that berm needs to be higher. Or eventually you build a knee wall, right? Or another wall. So
if you do phase 1 over on the west side here, would that mean that the water from underneath or wherever in an event would accumulate over on the east side?
No, the way that, so you're getting flooded from the tide coming up the Ashley River on the west side, right? That's the tide. So the water, you have this broad system, right? And you even connect, through the Wapu Cut, you're even connected over to the Spano, right? And you're going up to the Wanda. You have this huge wide system. So you're not going to deflect water around there. Shallow groundwater, its reach is generally, it's fairly limited unless you have a very wide but not deep shallow groundwater aquifer. And that's one of the things that a water plane will help tease out is, what are the depths and the extents of the shallow groundwater system here. There is some information already. We know that the College of Charleston has that, but it hasn't been analyzed. We need to understand that better.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Hey, all, quick note on just we're getting close to 10 o'clock. Another couple more questions lined up here. Just been scheduled to try to get to this language review at 10 o'clock. So anyway, just want to make that note. But y'all keep going. Thank you.
So I have a
Well, I don't know
question,
if I'm
Dale.
up next.
Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
Okay. So first of all, you mentioned earlier, Dale, that the port realignment is moving forward with assurance, which is very welcome news. And as you know, there are additional alignment questions along the east side. It's certainly the Aquarium Wharf Cultural District, all the institutions that reside there, as well as the proposed development all the way down to Waterfront Park. So two questions. One, I've heard some concern voiced by some members of the community that if the alignment is not fixed moving into PED process, that it could not subsequently be altered or modified to contend with, new data and certainly the existing concerns. So if you could comment on the ability for the alignment to be considered in PED phase is one question. And then secondly, the notion of the wall as a solution or prevention for the flooding that we experienced last week is welcome news. But again, it points back to the alignment questions, particularly on the east side. If institutions like the aquarium and the museum and Fort Sumter and College of Charleston are outside of the wall, it represents a huge impediment to business as we see the frequency of these flooding events as anticipated increase over the next couple of decades. And so the notion of shutting down every couple of weeks or even bi-weekly, once a week, is very daunting. So I'm wondering how that would be managed if in that extreme scenario, those institutions were outside of the wall.
So alignment changes, your first question, it is in the TSP that alignment changes are fully within the realm of PED. New data, new construction techniques, new whatever, there's language in there and I can dig it up and send it to everyone. It's in there. So the authority to do that is there. And you can see this major realignment that's occurring before PED for the port, important port facilities. I mean, they're doing it. So there is the process enables alignment changes. And really those alignment changes need to be based upon good information, and that good information is what you get in PED. That's the design and engineering phase. So that I hope that creates some confidence. And I think you could see the city comments on the TSP. We have concerns about some portions of this alignment, not the least of which are Morrison and the Lockwood corridor, the alignments of the structure in PED in the TSP. So we're going to work to make sure we get a better alignment. So we're anticipating changes, and it's possible. I think I understood your question regarding the east side and the Gastonboro neighborhood, and then sort of south of Sweet Landing and south. It's going to be tricky. Again, we need more information there. There's geotech information, there's more survey information. There's a lot of stuff that's needed to make sure we can get a good line there. We have to do that work. But the tidal gates, if this is your question, what I just described with the tidal gates shutting down, those are the most outward of all the gates. The interior gates, the pedestrian gates, the vehicular gates, the railroad gates on the port, those do not have to be closed, because what we're trying to do is to prevent, because we're talking about an 8-foot or a 9-foot tide, not a 12 or 14-foot tide. So those interior gates will be open, and no impediments to business or recreation would occur within that area. Again, once you start to approach a major tide, big flood or big tide or big surge, that's when you start to close all of the gates. But it's going to depend upon the level of ground, relative level of ground where that gate structure is, and then what kind of tidal flood is expected. And then they'll determine if they close it or not. And you're on fairly high, that area surrounding Gadsdenbury is not on the lowest portion of the peninsula. So we don't anticipate, top of my head, I don't see that closing every 2 weeks, not at all. So may close during king tide season. So does that help?
I think, Jordy, thank you for graciously offering.
Thanks, Dale.
Lay that question. Bob, I see Bob will be the last question/comment, and then we'll move over to the language review.
Yeah, make it quick. I could even take the answer off line with Dale, but and disproving the adage that there's no such thing as a dumb question. But where does the water, so we're relying on this network of pumps. Where does the water go?
What water? The storm
Well, the
water?
water that's being pumped off the peninsula, if we have a,
It
a
goes back into the
storm
rivers.
environment.
Yeah, it goes back into the river. There's
Okay, and there's capacity for that when all this is going on?
Yeah, provided the pump stations are elevated or designed appropriately. Yeah, I mean, the stormwater system is designed, the pump stations are elevated and they have redundant, they're supposed to have redundant generation systems that they can work through storms. So that is part of the, the redundancy in a pump station design. It's what Matt Fountain's team looks at very carefully. And we know, I think they're planning a major revamp of the Concord Street station. So, and how robust it needs to be. But the water itself that gets in from rainfall, it gets pumped back out into the river. I mean, again, this is a large system. So the amount of water we're talking about pumping out is not,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking.
One nasty revelation that I had when my house flooded 3 times was the toilets wouldn't flush.
Yeah.
It was sort of not to be gross, but because there was no place for the effluent to go. So
Right.
that's cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah,
All right, great. Well, thank you.
so yours.
Let's see. All right. So next, so we're going to start with. So I misspoke earlier. We've already gotten through the natural and nature-based solutions, which is the reason it's not on the agenda. Oh, thank you, Kaylin. Okay, perfect. I'm sorry, I'm not my usual spot here. So we're going to start with Susan's language, go from the bottom to the top. And so, I'm sure everybody's had a chance to read it. If not, go ahead and take a second. My review of it seems to make a lot of sense, but I think the goal here will just be to have conversation as necessary or comments, questions as necessary regarding this language. And then, such as we have for the other recommendations, move to approve the language to be included in our address to City Council. And so, so with that said, any thoughts, comments, questions regarding this language? I'm going to open up the floor to the group. And thank you, Susan, for drafting it.
My pleasure. I just wanted to add one comment as I thought about writing this or sort of drafting it. I think that the engagement of this committee, if indeed we move ahead to PED, needs to be really intense and specific. In some ways, we didn't have that opportunity early on, and a lot of homework that might have been done didn't get done. But as we move to PED, this is really critical. And I think the communication among the city people, the Army Corps planners, and us is really top of mind, at least in my mind. And we need to also be able to get that information out to the public in a way that has not yet happened. So I think this is really important at this point.
Hey, Kaylin, I think the ordinance ended up. Okay, thank you. No, sorry. Thank you, Susan. That makes a lot of sense. And you're right. I mean, Dale, what does that look like? To dig further into Susan's comment, what does that look like from a timeline standpoint? I mean, when and how does work product begin getting generated?
Yeah, so The Resilience Office belief is that the advisory committee has served a good role. It's a sounding board. It's tortured us a little bit. It's all good, right? This is all part of the transparency process of such a big thing. So we would support the idea of the advisory committee staying in place, providing some oversight and some communication roles going forward through PED. So 2 thumbs up for this from my own personal perspective. The Corps of Engineers, once they get to their agency decision milestone, they have all their jargon, but pretty soon they're gonna have a final recommended plan that's gonna run up through the division and through headquarters. If everything goes right, it will get a signed chief's report. That will then go to Congress for the authorization and appropriation to really begin PED. So that is the big expenditure. That's when the $2 million gets spent for surveys, and we tee up the engineers to go and talk to the folks in Rosemont about what does non-structural mean for each individual house, surveys, all those kind of things. That work could probably start as early as third quarter of 2022, looking at how this works, because the Corps can do, the district can do some of that work off of their general budget. Some of it doesn't have to take, big dollars, but you need the big dollars after an authorization and appropriation before the Corps can start to do the big work with the city. That big work is not likely to start until maybe Q4 of 2022 or Q1 of 2023. So the advisory committee may get a bit of a break here, and we're willing to meet as needed with the committee in this sort of lull period when the project is being reviewed at higher levels of the Corps. But we think we would probably need the committee to be committed, again, to engage, a year from now, 9 months from now on a more regular basis. There will be a little bit of a break or an intermission.
Per the ordinance, just a reminder, the first 6 months were bi-monthly meetings, and then following the initial 6 months of the organization of the committee, it was monthly meetings, and then, at the discretion of the committee. So that's the target of where we're at per the ordinance.
Can we change that if we want to have them more frequently?
I believe it's at the discretion of the committee, so yes.
Dale, how will we know what kinds of discussions are going on between now and before it goes to the big guys down in Washington? In other words, how will we know how the commentary that came out of the second, public comment period affects this alleged final draft?
So the comments are in, the Corps is processed with them, and formally we've heard that there's nothing we're going to require a major change to the TSP. However, until you see that in writing, it's just sort of anecdotal. It's whatever we call that, hearsay. So let's wait and see that. The Corps will make an agency decision milestone that is with headquarters and division and district sometime in December, we hear. And then that will create the recommended plan. Okay, and then you'll know what that is. And the Corps has to describe the nature of the incoming comments from the second comment period, and then what they think about them. And they're required to respond to them if they touch upon violations or questions about existing federal policy. If someone says, hey, well, we want you to deal with stormwater on Daniel Island, the Corps can just ignore that because it's irrelevant to this, okay? So they have to respond to things that are relevant to the structure and this proposal in this place.
Thank you.
And we're happy to update. I'm happy as those steps occur, I'm happy to update the committee as needed.
I think that would be good.
Sure.
Well, thank you. Is there any more commentary, questions, anything else on the on Susan's language? So not hearing any objections, I move to have this language incorporated as one of our recommendations. Do I have a second?
I have a second.
Thank you. So we'll go to a vote. Any additional commentary, questions, anything along those lines, discussion regarding the motion? All right, not hearing any. All those in favor, I guess the easiest way to do this, given the Zoom and the wording up, please, please raise your hands. Kellen, does that work for you?
Yeah, everybody can say aye or raise their hand. I guess if you oppose, make sure you say no really loud.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. That's the next point. Any against? Please say no really loud. All right. It is so moved. So we'll get that incorporated into the language. Okay, so the next piece of language is co-authored from Bob, Laura, and Susan. Thank you all for doing that. And Laura couldn't be with us, but she wrote me a note in support of the direction that we're going and in support of the language. So that was positive. And so, again, it's a similar situation. Everybody's hopefully had a chance to read through this. Bob, just as Susan did, would you like to give any commentary regarding the language?
Well, a lot of discussion we've had is around the capacity of the city to resource the project from a dollars and cents standpoint. And this is just an attempt to emphasize that not only is the expertise and, just arms and legs important, but that a plan is essential because hiring takes a long time. And to have the right staffing in place to do this, where it doesn't suck away attention and focus and resource from all the other, drainage projects that we have to do. That was the intent of the draft.
Thank you. Similar to Susan's language, or I guess I'll ask the question. Are there any comments, questions, anything, clarifications? Cashin, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This it's sort of related to the language that Bob submitted, which I think is great. But in the Wagner and Ball discovery report that Dale and colleagues authored, there's among the number of great recommendations for PED that I hope the city will follow. One of them is that the city should formalize the sort of the internal staff into a core internal coordinating committee, formalize that to ensure that department heads and relevant staff are communicating and working on the project together to ensure that all the city's priorities across departments are met. And I don't think it needs to be incorporated into the motion, but I do think that's one of the really important recommendations in that discovery report. So I just wanted to iterate our support for the city formalizing that internal coordinating committee. The staff has done a great job so far, but I do think making that a formal process is an important recommendation for PED.
Thanks, Cashin. I wonder if there's a way we can incorporate that into that comment into Bob's language. Or Dale, you probably have a comment. I see your hand up on
it. Two things. Any staff time. So this is related to the language under review. Any staff time or external consultants that the city would hire to help with PED. It's an expense, right? There's, it's not free, but there's an expense associated with that, either the hours of the employee or the fee to the consultant. That is billed to the project. That is part of the city cost share. So keep that in mind. That's just an important consideration when you think about, opportunity cost of money. The second,
Dale, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that budgeted? Is that currently budgeted or unbudgeted in the estimates we've been talking about, the city's contribution to the project?
No, we're just running off the raw numbers of what, for the city's contributions to PED, what we estimated. We're estimating what the Corps of Engineers has said, this is what we think the city's contribution will be, and we broke that down into years. Again, how that money gets spent, the city does have a design component in PED, and whether the city does that in-house or hires a consultant to do that, the fee for that, so my time or Alan's time, he's not going to be here, but it's a time from the design division, that can be billed to the project and it is part of the city cost. Does that clarify? And then regarding this coordinating committee, Mark had, when the TSB was released in April 2020, I want to say for 6 or 7 months, Mark had a monthly ad hoc meeting with department heads that were impacted by the 3x3. And that was fine. And then that stopped. I don't know why, but I do think you're right. We need a COCOM in the jargon. We need a coordinating committee within the city departments to make sure that everyone is aware going forward what's going on with PED and how do we coordinate. It's the job of resilience officers is to knit together the silos. That's what you do. That's part of the sort of the key requirements, and this would be part of that. So this makes a lot of sense, and I would commit myself to working with whoever else to get that set in place, to get that monthly meeting or bi-monthly meeting set in place. So it's a good recommendation.
Thank you, Dale. No, that all sounds good. Is there, yes, with all that discussion in place, are there any modifications that anybody on the committee would like to make to this language? Cash, is there anything you'd want to add to kind of get to your point regarding?
I'm not sure that it needs to be a part of the formal motion. We're talking about staffing going into PED, and I just wanted to iterate that point because I think it is one of the really important recommendations coming out of that discovery analysis, and I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention.
Thank you, Cashin. Not hearing any additional comment, I'd like to make a motion that we incorporate this language into our series of recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any additional discussion or comment regarding the language of the motion? Not. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed say nay. All right, it is so moved. So we'll this will get incorporated into our series of recommendations, and then the final recommendation is the introduction in PED language recommendation. This is definitely the longest of the group, and obviously a lot of content is in there. So wanted to open this up similar to the other language for discussion. I drafted. I mean, my commentary on it is it's a lot. It's a lot to put in to kind of summarize where we are right now. But hopefully, it got the major bullet points across, as well as our clearly stated our recommendation, which was to cautiously move forward with the PED phase. So with that, I'll look for hands with regards to comments and questions or any additional thoughts there. And just a note, I can't see everybody, so if you do have a comment, I'll just try to click through everybody to make sure I'm on the lookout. Go for it, Bob.
Hey, good. I think one of the continuing tensions is 3x3 versus the other water management infrastructure capital projects that we have to do. And I don't think that we have good visibility on what the specific commitment is that other projects will progress. They'll get funded, they'll get staffed. And, you know, we reference the need and the urgency of the water plan to sort of knit these different demands into one relatively cohesive game plan. I'm just wondering out loud if we can be more strident in terms of the city needs to make a commitment that 3x3 progress will not confound efforts to do the other things that we need to do.
That's a good point. I'm just kind of going through it right now. Thinking how we can, maybe we add some language to that point on that third paragraph. You know, I mean, that could be a second sentence, that third paragraph, which addresses the overall water management system.
Hey, good, if I may, just two quick questions or two quick
Yeah,
comments.
please.
One, the water plan is in the budget for next year. It was approved by the Ways and Means Committee yesterday. So it is there. There are a couple questions about this from some council members. I've developed a one pager that is not yet ready for prime time, but when it is, I'm happy to share that, or what a water plan is. And there are a lot of components of water plan already in existence in the city. There's been a lot of good work already done. So we're not starting from scratch. Number two, we've said this before, but the drainage fee and the stormwater fees, they fund the stormwater department, and they are segregated from everything else. That money goes to Matt's team and they use it for Matt's projects. Matt is the representative of stormwater. So no money from those fees or for the staffing, the operations of that department would come to the PED. It's not an either or. We're not talking zero sum. We have to fund the PED from something else than the stormwater fees and the stormwater, the drainage fees. So I don't know if that creates any confidence, but that's, you know, that's there.
To some extent, Dale, I'm speaking for conversation from the constituents. We had a CNA meeting earlier, and an explanation to our people about why major capital projects are not moving forward that are felt to be urgent. And the one that always comes up is Calhoun West, which is big ticket, big benefits. So the flow from, you know, the real-time flow is more expense. Big capital projects that might relate to additional taxing, bond floats, other things. People, I don't think, are yet comfortable that ginormous other projects that are essential, there's a line of sight on how we're going to get those done.
I'd like to second what Bob said. There was a meeting over here on the west side as well about that subject. And it's unclear to a lot of people how exactly that's going to work. If the money and the energy and the oxygen are all going into the wall or to the Army Corps, resources and otherwise, what is going to happen to the other projects? So there's concern out there. And I think if indeed there's a balance, and if we know that, then we need to get that across.
Yes, so just a couple quick notes is you know, we're the good news, and this is a good thing, we're put forward that the water plan recommendation. As Dale mentioned, it's been budgeted for. And so anyway, so that's a good thing. I mean, that work is in progress, number one. And number two, I know Councilmember Seekings has brought this up a number of times, and as he knows, I'm in same as a lot of us, you in particular, Sue, as well as others. I'm in that Calhoun West area, just personally, and so I know from that, I know Councilmember Seekings has always been a huge proponent of that project, which is always greatly appreciated. Councilmember, I don't mean to catch you off guard here, but do you have any thoughts on Bob and Susan's comments?
Well, yeah, and sorry, I'm sort of offline, kind of. I've had some internet issues over here, so I'm connected about 3 different ways. Yeah, I mean, I've made it no secret, sort of my view of the world is that we've got lots of needs and wants, not just on the peninsula, but around the city for water management, and how this project integrates into those projects which we've been talking about and actually moving at least slowly forward on a few. I think is still uncertain, and it's a conversation that we clearly need to have. I was involved in both the meeting referenced by Bob, the CNA meeting, and the meeting referenced by Susan on Friday with the homeowners who live along the western edge of the peninsula. And I think that their concerns are legitimate, and I think you're going to hear a lot as this comes forward to council about how are we going to put together a plan that we stick to moving forward, given all the needs and all the capital needs. They're all big, right? And Dale's right. I mean, we have certain segregated pots of money, but there are no large pots of money to put to either the construction of 3x3 or the construction of Calhoun West that have been identified today. We have to be committed to integrating our plan and then moving forward. And just one quick point of clarification, Dale. Yesterday it was at the budget committee workshop that the budget was presented and the monies for the water study were in there. It's clear from the conversations around that table that the budget is going to move forward with that in it. I don't think there's going to be any resistance to it. It's how we fund that budget is always the question. So sort of a long answer to, as I sit here today as a citizen and as a city councilman, I share some of the same concerns I've heard from my constituents about how we're going to integrate large-scale water management projects across the city while we are pursuing both PED and construction of the 3x3 recommendations. And there is no answer right now that I know of. There are some thoughts about it. And the best and biggest thought that I've got is we have to have a plan. We have to be committed to it. We have to understand how it's integrated and worked. And then we have to go on the market and sell the hell out of it. All across the board, at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level, at the private level. I mean, all of those are going to have to be options, but we're in the very nascent days of the finance side of large scale infrastructure projects for flooding of the city of Charleston, period. And I don't think that we can say anything other than that right now. And we operate, as you all know, just so to be complete about this, on a balanced budget around $220 or $230 million a year. You saw the map that Dale put up earlier about sort of capital projects and water management projects. We're talking about billions. So that gap is not just a little. We're not talking about a $1 mil tax increase, which, by the way, gets people's blood pressure through the roof. We're talking about real money here. So you can imagine what that conversation is going to look like. I wish I had great insight into this. I don't, but I do believe that having a strategic plan going forward that we all are on the same page on and are willing to pursue moving forward will go a long way to starting to answer those questions. And for those who live in the Calhoun West watershed, clearly water management in that watershed is needed, and the deep tunneling projects we know work. If you saw last week when we had those crazy high tides, the corner of East Bay and Calhoun Street was bone dry. It was bone dry for 2 reasons. One of which is the Calhoun East project, 2 of which is we've done some pretty good work with the check valves and checking off some of the points of access along the east side as well. But you know, the west side was bone dry because the check valves are working until the tide hit 7.2 feet. And then it was River City. So it overtopped. I didn't really plan on talking as long as I did, but you asked me. So Calhoun West, as you know, it's no secret, to me is the most important project that's out there that we've got to pursue. It will work. It will manage water that comes from many different directions, not just one, and it's got to be integrated into whatever we do going forward. So, you know, I don't think I've made any secret about that.
Thank you, Councilmember. And maybe what we can do is I can go back and maybe add a little more language on that third paragraph. Add one or two more sentences, and anybody that you know, Bob, Councilmember Seekings, anybody else that has any other language recommendations there, please shoot them over to me, and I can take a stab at that and recirculate it.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's,
Yes, sir. Yeah. Hey,
yeah, we still got the language. Maybe we can take the language down. We can see one another a little bit better. Just to follow up on what Councilman Seeking said, you know, if we had the money to do Calhoun West, I think that would be the fastest unanimous vote that would ever go through council to get a major drainage project done. I've had the pleasure of serving as chairperson of the Public Works Committee where things like that come through since 2012. We have not had the money to do it. It's not the will, the money just hadn't been identified. The September Clark Spring Fishburne project that we all now, you know, is coming downhill and, you know, ready for the pump station. You know, you see it between the two bridges going up right now. To date, that's the largest single drainage project that was done, and that's right at about $200 million. And we had it was 158 million, and of course we had a big surprise with overruns and all of that. But look at how the money was cobbled together to do that. I mean, you had money from the city, you had money from the State Infrastructure Bank, we had federal grants. We had from federal government all the way down to local government. I think this effort for 3x3 has been wonderful from the standpoint of exposing what we need to do. I do believe that, frankly, the leadership on this, and I'm part of that leadership, so I'm not trying to point the fingers at everybody. I think the vision has been too small in that when it comes to raising this money, there's no sense in soft pedaling around. The city of Charleston doesn't have the money to do this. And I said on a previous meeting, I think the financing of this reminds me of trying to throw Jello up against the wall and hoping it's gonna stick. I mean, even in the newspaper, some of the things that were said was to be determined, to be determined. We're gonna go into $1 billion project with to be determined. One of the best things on this committee is we have different stakeholders. Thank God State Ports was on there. I appreciate Jordy speaking up. I appreciate Ken Mills speaking up. I appreciate all y'all speaking up. And this is why, because I think it's going to lead to a better financing solution. In 1984, the city did a drainage study. And there are projects that were listed in 1984 that we haven't come close to doing in 2021. So when people, West Ashley, for example, or James Island or Johns Island, when you have a Councilman Griffin asked a question, Dale during the presentation, what was he to say to his constituents who every time we have a major rain event and water threatens coming in their home, what is he to say to those constituents telling them that 3x3 is not going to help them at all? The answer cannot be the peninsula has some very important assets. Colleges and universities and hospitals are on the peninsula. When somebody, I have constituents, when we get around about 3 inches of rain over in the Ardmore area, we literally have people having water come in their homes. I don't mean the backyard getting filled up or the front yard getting filled up. And those projects were identified in 1984 and still have yet to be done. And it's not because of bad council leadership or mayor leadership. We had priorities that took, high priorities, but to go into this type project without a comprehensive approach and having all the stakeholders around the table, we're going to ask county council for $25 million. You see any representative of county council on this committee? We're going to ask the state for $100 million. At least that was in the paper. You see anybody from the state of South Carolina on this committee? We can ask them for their money, but they can't be a part of the process. I just never seen that happen before. I can learn things. Hopefully that's one reason God, I think when we quit learning, maybe they call us home. But it's going to be very, very difficult for council, as I see it, to vote for a plan that right now it appears to put one community against the other. And I've thought about this. I haven't shared this with Councilman Seekings, but it's not the people on the Battery or LeGree Street on Ansonborough saying, we don't want to fix anything on the Upper Peninsula. We don't want to fix up with some of the concerns that Herbert's talking about. We don't want to, they're not saying we don't want to satisfy the concerns that Kevin Mills has about the aquarium. They're not saying, forget those people on James Island and Johns Island, West Ashley. It's the leadership. It's the leadership that have carved out a solution that says, this is the solution that we're going to bring the Corps in and address. I think there's a way out there that, but one thing this process has done, it has put out, and I commend the mayor and Dale and all the team and the Dutch dialogues and all of that, saying, folks, the time is now. We got to do something. And I agree with that. I had lunch with Senator Scott day before yesterday. And with this infrastructure bill coming up, if this ain't the time, and with ARPA funds out there, if this is not the time to go for a $3 billion project, okay, a comprehensive water plan and the wall in conjunction to save one of the finest cities in America. We had a wonderful presentation by the Brigadier General of the Corps at the last council meeting, and scored at 10-1 and all of that. I agree with all of that. But we are still leaving water coming into people's homes. And when we do it in a partial way, it's going to suck whatever remaining resources we have. It has already been 1984, 16, and 21. That's 37 years that we've got projects that have not scratched the surface, that not because we don't want to do them, we just don't have the money to do it. So now we suck all the resources going towards primarily the wall, and to say that we have stormwater fees, it's just not, it's not efficient. We don't have enough money. We do have a fund, but it gets going real fast. Let's put it like that. I think we raised, and Mike helped me out with this, 11, 12 million a year with stormwater fees. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. We just upped the fees a couple of years ago. I think it's 12 million.
So that tells you when you're dealing with 11, 12 million coming in annually, how do you do a $500 to $600 million Calhoun West project? When you look at that map and the drain field that it would help, it's like, we got to do this. It doesn't matter what part of town you live in, you got to do this. And for a decade now, not only Mike's been there, Councilman Seeking's been there longer than I. It's not that he didn't want it done. It's not that the mayor and council didn't want it done. We didn't have the revenue, and we have not put the financial formula in place and put the allies around the table. I still say this needs to be done on a regional basis. This sea level rise is not the cities of Charleston's problem alone. And we're approaching it as though primarily it's a peninsula problem. And we're leaving money on the table doing that. I say that to everybody on this committee, and I will say that whenever language is approved by this committee. I didn't vote, and you know, Councilman Seekins didn't vote because I really, and I think he is too, we all are interested in what this committee has to say. But stakeholders speak up. When State Ports Authority spoke up, I guess the wall's going to be moved. I would love to hear what County Council has to say. If we're going to ask them for 25 million, I certainly would like to see them around the table. They may have some other areas of suggestion as well. Charleston water systems. I think they're a stakeholder. They should be around the table. But anyway, sometimes out of all bad comes some good. I don't know how this vote is going to go to move forward. But I would tell you what, if it doesn't go forward, I would only hope it would be because we're trying to reach for something better, not to end something. It should be the beginning of something better. If we go forward in a partial direction, then we'd have a splinter community, because the person who's got water coming in their home right now, doesn't matter where they live at, even Calhoun West, if the question were to be asked, well, we're going to do the wall and the Corps going to help us with that. What about all the houses that over in the camp? How many acres did that cover, Councilman Seekins? Like 1,600 acres or something?
For Calhoun West?
Right.
850.
850 acres, okay? On the peninsula, 850 acres. So how much, it's already been a decade that I've known about Calhoun West, that I've been willing to say, give me a chance to vote to appropriate the money so we can fix that, okay? It's been a decade. And when I look forward to say, what resources, if we do vote to go ahead with PED, how does Calhoun West figure in that? And not on a drawing board, how do we pay for it and get it done? How do we take the action steps? Right now, I don't know how it's done, and I don't know anybody in the city of Charleston that's working on the revenues. And I'll say that to the mayor. Who's working on the money to get that 500 or 600 million to take those people in the 800-acre drain field and take them out of jeopardy? And it's just not the people that live there. As we traverse the city, there've been times when I've, I got a big truck, and then we have a little sports car that my wife and I sometimes tool around in. Come off the peninsula in that little sports car, and I come down Wentworth Street to go to Lockwood, and then bang, oh man, I got to circle around. I can't make it through. There are times I can't make it through in my full-size Ford F-150 pickup truck. I have to turn around. So the people who live there, they just have to wait till the water go down. We can do something about that. We just need a better plan. And this is the third time y'all have heard me rant about this. We have had major projects. We have had billion-dollar efforts in this community before. Those half-cent sales tax are very powerful. What would a quarter of a penny do if on countywide to go towards paying for what we're talking about right here? But we're not going to be able to do that as a city unto itself. We have to include allies, the county. I'm surprised the town of Mount Pleasant, especially the Old Town area that floods, I'm surprised they haven't had an opinion on this at all, but maybe they're going to go it alone as well. So I want you all to be clear. There's not the money to do the other projects that need done to take people out of jeopardy, and pretty much all over this city. You know, some of the things that people on this committee has talked about, the money's not there to do it. Rosemount should never have the drainage problem that it's had today. It's just been when the money runs out, it runs out, and unfortunately it's ran out on the people in Rosemount. So, but is there a time to, this is the largest infrastructure bill since Eisenhower administration came up with the interstate. And what is our strategy to get a slice of that financial pie to fix a generational problem that we have? I should say generational problems that we have. I don't know what that strategy is. So bring your voices to the table when you come. Don't think it's people being selfish. I'm part of that leadership. And if the plan is to go forward with a partial wall protecting partial people and drain fields still remaining for generations to come, I think we can do better. Let's put it like that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Your comments are always greatly appreciated, and I know a lot of insight and experience goes into those. So thank you. Real quick, just point, Susan, I do see your hand up. I saw Dan after that, so we'll get to everybody. So just a quick point of order here. I know we're still having discussion, but we do need to get through this today in order to meet the time frame. Otherwise, we'll have to pull from the agenda. And so I added a sentence up here to Bob's point that Kalen has incorporated in highlighted yellow. So everybody take a look at that. And I'm going to go ahead with that. Just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. But given timeliness, I'll wait until, I'll wait to see if there's any additional commentary. So Susan, please go for it.
Thank you. I listened to the budget workshop yesterday, and I was very pleased to see that $500,000 is allocated to the water management plan. I wanted to ask about a timeline on that, given the discussion that is going on here. How soon would it be possible to pull together enough of that plan to be able to answer some of these questions that are on everybody's mind and have been since 1984. Thank you.
Dale, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Councilman Waring, for the expertise and the insight that you're sharing. And I'm happy to talk about this with anyone. We have been speaking at a staff level with folks in the county. We're going up in early December to speak with folks in the state. We have this discussion about financing other mechanisms. We are working on this, but we don't have anything concrete yet until there's a final plan. And then we go through PED to see how we're going to build it. And that's going to take some time. So there is an opportunity here to figure out how we pay for this. Your investment, so it isn't an either or situation here. The city of Charleston has to do best. It's what the Dutch Dialogues team said, is what anyone else says. You have to be able to do both of these things, because the stormwater will overwhelm you on an insidious daily or monthly basis, right? This Calhoun West solution and other solutions around the city. Absolutely correct. And I agree 100% with that. And let's make no mistake about that. A surge event will devastate the city and devastate a lot of other things around the city. So we have to be able to do both. It's not either or, it's and. That's how I approach this. So you have my commitment, make it clear here that I agree we need to do both. And where do we get the money? Yeah, the ARP is one thing. The ARP is going to be rolled out over 5 years, and those projects will be constructed over probably another 5 to 15 years. Infrastructure money gets pushed out, but it doesn't get absorbed quickly. That's, use infrastructure as a stimulus for short-term recession. It never works because infrastructure goes over decades sometimes. So we need to figure out how we can get advantage of this money, and we will. We're committed to doing that. A water plan, it has to be procured. So there's an internal city process to spend that money to procure it. It won't be the city staff doing this. The city staff is committed elsewhere. There's a lot of information already available. So it will be integrated into that, but you'll have to hire a consultant. That takes a couple months to go through that process. Then you have to scope the final demand, and it may take up to a year to do a water management plan. I mean, the consultants needs to understand all the integration of spatial planning and land use and what's already on the books and the direction that the city's already set on those issues, and then looking at the various water challenges. And the reference to the 1984 drainage plan, I'm sorry, but that's probably out of date. The city has grown so much. The drainage system has changed so much. The occupation of the land has changed so much. The elevation of the water, the outfalls into the rivers has changed so much that the drainage plan from 1984 is probably direction at best, that it probably needs to be revisited. So, I mean, a water plan is going to take some time. In New Orleans, that was a $3 million effort, a $3 million water plan. New Orleans is much bigger. That took 3 years. So again, I wouldn't assume it's done in 3 months. I would assume from the day it's procured and you put a consultant team to do it, assume a year. And you could nudge them hard to do 9 months, but do you really want to rush this important work? Do you need to let this work, you know, develop in a sensible way? So I would say a year, which is fine because it will inform PED and it can inform the 2023 and 2024 city budget and city allocations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Bob, I like that language. So that's pretty good. So thank you. And am I missing? So Dan, do you want to go ahead? I know there's some commentary going on. I appreciate everybody kind of parallel tracking this stuff. Dan,
real quick, because I feel as though we're being rushed. And I think we've had that feeling probably for the last 6 months. I noticed in the chat that Kaylin is indicating that we must vote on this or must have a recommendation today. Can you, my first question is, I just want to know why that is and why we might not be able to have more dialogue on this, because I think there's still, just by seeing the chat board back and forth, some uncertainty as to this language. And my second thing is, with respect to the language, I would strongly urge us that we have stronger language on some of these items. Like, I think we need to, demand is to, but at least petition City Council to do the comprehensive water management plan integrated. Petition them that they must do a resiliency study as part of for the Rosemont area. And I'd like to list all of the assets that are not currently being protected under the current alignment, and state that we'd like all the assets that are not currently protected to be included in the realignment, which would include obviously all the port assets that we have so diligently worked to get into the plan. So those are my comments, but maybe you can answer the specifics as to how we're, with the timeline.
Yeah. Hey, Kaylin, let me just.
Yeah, sure. I can address the timeline. Per the last committee meeting, it was agreed that I don't want to say final because this committee is ongoing, but the language recommendations for PED based off of the timeline we were given by the Corps and when the council needs to make their decision would be placed on next Tuesday's, the 23rd agenda for City Council. I obviously, if the committee doesn't come to an agreement, there won't be anything to present on Tuesday, and we would remove that item from the agenda and would have to then push it to the next City Council meeting. So apologies for the word must. It's just if we want to keep that presentation by the chair on this upcoming Tuesday council meeting, I mean, I guess the committee, if they don't come to a conclusion today, could potentially have an additional meeting between now and the council, but understanding we only have 8 of the voting members of the committee on right now, I don't know the likelihood of aligning schedules between now and Tuesday, and considering of a holiday going up. So that was the only timeline push, if you will, based off of what the committee agreed to do the presentation at council on the 23rd. So I guess the decision now would be to make if the committee would want to move forward with voting on this language as is now, or push the council presentation to a later date, but keeping in mind that council themselves will need to be bringing this up likely by the end of the year. So that's the timeline reference.
Hey, Dan, real quick, just let me, before, just to piggyback on that, and you might have some additional commentary here. The two things you mentioned were already approved recommendations that have been presented to city council and will be presented again in accordance with this whole document. So not to jump in front, I just wanted to make sure that point got across.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. I love reiteration and redundancy, so that's all good. But on the timeline, so Kaylin, you're thinking that the city council members will be voting on this when? I mean, I know we can look at the calendar. Do we know what meeting that this will be brought for a vote?
It's not been set yet, but from what, and Dale, feel free to chime in, but from what the Army Corps has told us is that they would need those letters of certification by, it could be pushed to later January. So based off of that time frame, and given council has their budget work as well, I believe that would be setting it up, and there's going to be 2 December meetings and then a January meeting. So that would leave it to either of those 3 meetings to bring up for council, assuming there'd be a first and second reading of what they would be doing.
The technical component of this is within the Army Corps decision-making is when a recommended plan is finally presented, again, and that is based upon what's called an agency decision milestone, an ADM. It's likely to occur in December. Division and headquarters is going to say, okay, do we have a willing federal local sponsor, the city? Because the Corps will not move forward with the rest of its processes unless there is a willing local sponsor. So if city council does not affirm its belief that the city should and could step into PED, the study will stop. There will be no movement of the process up through the chain of command of the Corps. There will be no authorization. There will be no chief's report. It will stop. Thus, with no surge protection in perpetuity. So we need to be clear about that because in the political processes on the Hill, the Corps of Engineers is going to say, we have willing local sponsors for this project and this project and this project and this project, but we don't have it for Charleston. Okay, Charleston doesn't want the help. Okay, we won't push it. And the Army Corps will direct its attention elsewhere. So, I mean, that's a very serious risk. And again, what we know about the benefits of this project, it is imperfect in the feasibility phase. I'm the first to acknowledge that. But do we want to lose this federal interest forever? I think General Kelly was very eloquent about that last week.
Well, thank you. And right now, I mean, the changes I'm seeing here are fairly minor. I mean, if you have an opportunity to, go ahead and memorialize this, then I think, and meet a time frame, knowing budget season's here, knowing that Charleston City Council is going to need an additional time for deliberation. I just would prefer we give them more time than less. Bob, I see your hands up.
Yeah, for what it's worth, and there's a natural, normal, understandable tension between, further refinement and urgency. For what it's worth, I agree with Haygood that we should, put the stake in the ground and not delay.
Good deal. Well, is there any other, thank y'all for this additional suggested language. Is there any other language that y'all would like to have here? And Dan, I can always download with you offline. We can add in stuff on the other recommendations as well. So additional commentary, however you want to phrase it. So we'll just circle up offline on that. Dan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I apologize. I have a hard stop, but hey, good. That would be fantastic. If I can connect with you to make sure the recommendation I made with respect to some specific language could be incorporated, that would be great. I really would appreciate that. So I'll reach out to you offline.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. And we do have to have a motion for this call-ins.
Unfortunately, Haygood, I think with Dan dropping off and from early on, the council members abstaining from voting for recommendations, we do not have a quorum for this right now. I think we had two members that were on the call and they both dropped off by now. So I'm not.
Oh, no. All right. Let's see.
Is there time to meet next week to deal with this?
Yeah, when do we have to do this to meet? And can we, I know we've talked about having a, like no email voting, so it's got to be, what is that? Yeah, what does that look like, Galen? Just is it scheduling another meeting such as this?
I mean, it would have to be done before Tuesday.
Okay.
I mean, I have to check with the clerk's office to see what the time frame is if something needs to be removed to council agenda items. So I can send out a poll and just, because I know it had been asked before and I asked legal, we can't do votes over email. Has to be in the public meeting setting.
Great. Well, that's what we'll do then. Kevin just put forward the point. Hey, just a quick call to affirm the vote between now and Tuesday. Do you want to send out a? And I see folks chiming in. I mean, I'm in the same boat. That would be fine by me. Maybe send out this revised language. Maybe we ask for any additional commentary by end of business tomorrow, and then try to have this call on to affirm the language on Friday or Monday. Does that sound good?
That's fine. I will work within those parameters and report back if any speed bumps get in the way.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody else or thoughts on that front?
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. It's more for Kaylin. Even though we abstain, how does that negate the quorum? Our votes would just be, so many in favor, so many against, and so many abstain.
You're right. I guess then if we took the vote now, and that would be the discretion of the chair, there wouldn't be a majority or quorum of the committee to move this language on to the presentation at this point, assuming if every member were to support that action. We have 9 members on right now, including you and Councilman Seekings, Councilmember Waring, and if you both abstain from voting, that would not leave enough majority of the committee to.
No, if we have a quorum counting us, our votes would just go down as abstention. You see, that's my point. In other words, I don't know how many it takes to have a quorum. So if we've got 19 people and we got 10 people here, because we abstain, you still have a quorum.
Okay.
The vote would be.
Quorum for this committee is 8, and we do have 9 on right now. So
if you did vote, there's a quorum here. You just have 2 abstentions. That's all. When you have the vote count, it could be 7 in favor and none against and 2 abstentions, but the quorum is still here. So that's just procedurally. I want.
Okay, I guess that would be the chair's discretion if a majority of the folks on this call now with the quorum vote to advance, even if that's not a majority of the committee, if you would feel comfortable moving that recommendation to council. Sorry, getting a little complicated here.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, so what I'd like to do is go ahead and move forward under that. If there's anything else we have to do additionally, then we can schedule and figure it out. But I appreciate you, Councilmember Waring, and that comment. So with that said, can you put that language back up, Kalen? Great. And then Susan, I saw you had a note or question or something. Saw the hand up.
I just feel as though this is a really important vote for this committee. I don't want to jimmy the works here, but don't you think it would be important to have most of the committee voting on it?
You know, frankly, at the moment, this is all procedural, really. I mean, you know, Councilman Waring had a good point. I mean, we do have a quorum here. Obviously, we're in a time frame that language was sent out without any commentary in the interim time since Friday when it was sent. So everybody's had ample time to look at it. We've been talking about this since February, whenever our first meeting was.
All of our votes have been unanimous. Dan's comments notwithstanding. I mean, all of our votes have been unanimous, so there'd be reason to believe that there would be widespread support.
Okay, just thought I'd bring it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we all kind of had a wide understanding that this was coming. I think Laura knew she wasn't able to attend and sent a note in advance. So I think there was a broad understanding.
Thank you, Cashin.
So, Mr. Chair, with the clarity that Council Member Waring provided, if you'd like, you can make a motion with on the calls now, or you can push it. So
I would like to make a motion, and real quick, Herbert, let me just get to your comment before we do that.
You're on mute.
I think you're on mute. Yep.
My bad. Thank you, Kaylin. In listening to all our conversations, if we vote now to adopt the language, is there a possibility, a likelihood that added language can be added to the document?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's still an address. I mean, I wouldn't say it'd have to be substantial, whatever. I mean, the point is that just, I mean, I think the answer is yes. I mean, these are kind of key points that are getting incorporated, key recommendations.
I would also add, Mr. Chairman, again, remember this committee is continuing throughout this process. So these are just the language of recommendations that the chairman would be providing on Tuesday night. There's always additional recommendations that the committee after Tuesday night, throughout this process can continue to go in front of council and provide. So this isn't like the final set of all, but this is for the timeline of where the city needs to make the decision process with PED. That's this language.
Mr. Chairman, this is Herbert. May I call you and to not prolong our proceeding? May I give you a call?
Yeah, absolutely. Call me anytime. If I'm just stacked up with Zoom calls until probably 2:30 or so. So just give me a call this afternoon whenever you can.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So with that, I will, I'll move to that we finalize the introduction, make a motion rather, that we finalize the introduction / PED language with the comments added in highlighted yellow. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those against say nay. All right, subject to anything additional we might have to do procedurally, this will be incorporated as written. And thank you everybody for your time. Appreciate everybody staying a couple minutes late. And thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say officially I abstain, and I'm pretty sure Councilman Seekins does as well. But anyway.
Thank you. I should have asked that. I apologize. And so
No problem.
that's the case on both. Thank you.
That will satisfy the quorum issue. Okay. Hey, you guys.
Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.